Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Zach Hunting. I'm on the advisory board of Seattle Interactive Conference. Let's see here. Who's here at the Seattle Interactive Conference for the first time? That's the same as the last session that I was in. That's a lot of people. Thank you for coming. Really appreciate it. This is definitely the year that we're setting a lot of records. I mean, we set a lot of records last year, but this year is even bigger. So anyway, we have an amazing talk lined up with Donte Parks, who's a co-founder, and what's your actual title over there?
VP of Culture.
VP of Culture at Substantial. So he's going to be talking about how to suck less, which you may be wondering why you should trust him, but actually you're probably not, because this is one of the most stylish dudes in Seattle, and he definitely knows. He'll tell you why even more. But anyway, thank you for coming, and put your hands together for Donte Parks.
Thank you, Zach. So, welcome to How to Suck Less. Let's just get right into this. If you want to tweet at me, feel free to use the hashtag #HowToSuckLess. I won't be checking it during the talk, but I will check them later. So, hi, I'm Donte. I am a music nerd, I'm a West Side Story enthusiast, and I love food, and I clearly love this outfit. But today I'm here because I am VP of Culture at Substantial, and I want to give you a little bit of context about Substantial. So, what is Substantial? Substantial is a digital product studio up on the hill. We are about 60 people. We build digital products and experiences, and we're pretty good at it. We've been around since 2006, and our clients range from Fortune 100 companies to nonprofits to startups, all kinds of things, all kinds of industries. It's fun times. And we do it across platforms, including web, mobile, and what I will call other. Example of this is Bluescape. Bluescape is a new product out of the market. It is, what you can tell from this picture here is that it is a visual, interactive, collaborative workspace. And what this gentleman here is doing is using a effectively infinite workspace and sharing it with his coworkers both in the same room on this large multi-screen array and on their tablet and on their desktop, but he's also sharing it with people in another office who has a similar setup. So what you can tell here is that it's multi-platform, it's multi-touch, and it introduces a lot of new user experience challenges along with your standard security and performance issues. So it's a lot of hard problems. Substantial enjoys solving hard problems and making them easy experiences for people to use. Now, more importantly, Substantial is a family. We like to treat our people well, and we do it because that is how we would want to be treated. It's as simple as that. A happy workplace is a good workplace. Now, we do that by being incredibly uncompromising about the kind of company that we want to be. We know that treating our people well and creating a positive work environment is actually the part that makes us great. It allows us to do the work that we do. It allows us to do the work that we do the way we want to do it. And it allows us to create the relationships that we want to have. And I'm not trying to say that I believe we've solved everything, but we have managed to do some things right. And so that takes a couple of different forms. That's everything from the day-to-day, whether it's creating very comfortable workspaces for people to work, living rooms much like this weird one that I'm speaking from, and all the way to bigger things like hosting events like Boiler Room, which is an underground music streaming performance site. This is what we did last year during the Decibel Festival. We invited a few hundred people to our office over a couple of days, and we had a good time. But more importantly, we do other kinds of events as well, on a regular basis, and I'll get into some more of that as I go along. So what am I going to tell you today? First off, what is company culture? Let's define the terms that we're working with and go from there. From there, we're going to go through how culture isn't just something that's orthogonal to the work that you do and to your business. It's everything about your business and If I can get that one fact into everyone's heads, I'll be happy about that. More importantly, your culture is always going to be changing. So rather than being something that is static and that you can completely control and keep in one place, it's like, no, it's something that's a moving target, and you need to recognize that. And how do you, once you recognize where your culture is, how do you make it go to the places where you want it to go? And lastly, I hope that I can inspire you to all go back to your companies and talk about how you can make your organization better. So let's get right on into it. What is company culture? Let's first start by talking about what company culture isn't, because there's a lot of confusion about this one. Culture isn't paid vacations. It isn't climbing walls in your office. It isn't stocked bars. It isn't Nerf guns or DJ booths. This one's ours. In short, your perks are not your culture. This isn't me saying that those things aren't important, but culture is a much bigger idea, and it's much more important to everything about the way that you do what you do. So culture is instead your inspiration. It's your environment, both physical and otherwise. It's your roots. It's your methods. And, of course, it's your people and everyone that comes along with that. So let's go with the real definition, and I know this one's accurate because I got it from a dictionary. Culture is a set of shared beliefs, values, and practices. Now, that's very easy to say, but what does that actually mean in real life? What it means is that culture is something that extends beyond some idea, some nebulous thing. It manifests itself in everything that your business does. Every business practice, every policy that you have, every benefit that you have, every perk that you have, every interaction that anyone that's dealing with your company that anyone has is somehow going to end up ultimately relating to your culture. And yes, I appreciate the coincidence of someone that has VP of culture saying that culture is the most important thing about your business. Let's just get right beyond that. But your culture is your business. It's everything. So here's how culture works. Effectively, you have your business practices. Those are going to affect your culture. Your culture is then going to affect your business practices. It's a never-ending feedback loop. And that is exactly how it should be, and that is okay. It is the soul of your company. It defines everything that your company does. It's the glue. It's the reason people care. So let's go and talk about how this is going to affect every single part of your business. One of the things that I've heard, or that I read recently, was that culture is the moments between the work. I strongly disagree with that. Instead, as I've mentioned, I believe that culture extends beyond it into everything that your company does. So let's talk about how. First off, are you creating a safe and comfortable environment for your staff? Is it a place where they can actually be productive? If it isn't, are you doing something about it? The next question that you should ask yourself is, are your people happy? And I guess the other one that's more related to this picture is, are you constantly getting sued? On the staffing and recruiting side, there are a couple of facts that I don't think anybody's going to debate. Recruiting is expensive. Training is expensive. Tribal knowledge leaves when your people do. The next one is happy employees don't leave. There's an asterisk to that because sometimes they do when it's out of your control. But generally, happy employees don't leave. Moreover, happy employees take the load off of your recruiting because they're out there spreading the word and acting as ambassadors for everything about your company. I'll speak to Substantial as an example here. We're about 60 people now. Over the last 5 years, we've managed to only lose, on average, 2 to 3 people a year voluntarily. And that rate hasn't changed despite the fact that we've grown from around 10-ish to 60. That's pretty impressive, especially in this economy and being a tech company. So the other part of this is, what kind of people are you hiring? And what are you hiring for? And I don't mean the positions that you're hiring for. I mean, do you value just the skills that people are bringing to the office, that's fine. I'm not arguing with you if that is what you do. But there's also more to that individual than the skills that they bring to bear. Does that matter to you? It's fine if it doesn't. Just be pretty honest about that fact. Operations. What are the facilities that you have, and what is the equipment that you provide say about what your company values? Are your people supported? Are they able to act in a productive manner? If they aren't, are you doing anything about it? This isn't me saying that every company needs to provide Rolexes and Ferraris for everybody, but there's a direct correlation between what your company is actually valuing and the way that you run your company and the facilities and equipment that you provide. And sales, business development, and marketing. This one's a little easier because it's about the story that you're telling. So how do you sell yourself to the world? Is the story that you're selling to the world the same one that you're using internally? Does everyone in your company even know what it is that you sell? And if they do know, do they agree with it? Or do they just think that all of your salespeople are full of shit? So I would argue that the first people that need to be bought into what your sales, business development, and marketing divisions are selling is the people that actually work at your company. That story should be unified across all of your organization. If it isn't, you should probably reconsider that a little bit because it's going to make it a little easier. And then lastly, the work. How do you go about the work that you do? Are you calm, cool, collected, or are you in constant firefighting mode? Does what you say about the way that you work actually align with reality? You know, one of the things that you'll often hear, and one of the things that I hate hearing and hate saying, is that we're a company that works hard and plays hard. I get it. You know, I understand the value in saying something like that. But often what you get with companies that say things like that is that, oh, we work hard and we play hard. But what that really means is we work hard and we say we play hard. For us, 40 hours a week is something that we mean. If someone is working more than 40 hours a week on a consistent basis, that's something that we want to address. That doesn't mean that crunch time doesn't happen, and you know, sometimes things happen. But by and large, when we say 40 hours, we mean it. At the end of the day on Friday, people are not working, and that version of not working can be pretty excited depending on what we have going on. You know, additionally, for us as an organization, you know, some of you have probably heard about agile and lean principles. I'll get into this a little more as I go on, but one of my coworkers is also going to be speaking on Wednesday. He's in this room. His name's Zach. His talk is going to be, it's titled Agile Lean. It's an attitude, not just a methodology. Short version of it for you, Agile and Lean is a set of principles about creating value, reducing waste, and orienting your organization around that. Substantial subscribes to many of these philosophies. However, it's not just something that you can prescribe. I'm going to get more into some of the nuts and bolts about this as I go along, but Zach's going to be going into more detail. So for those of you that are interested, that's going to be on Wednesday, 1010, room 202, I believe. Now that I've given you a little preface about culture, it's like one of the other things that people need to understand is that culture is a moving target. It's not indestructible like a diamond. It's not brittle like glass. However, it's not moving so quickly that it's torrential like a river. I would liken it more to a slow-moving fluid, like tree sap. You know, so let's take a very extreme example. If you look at a company like Apple, they're a much different organization now under Tim Cook than they were in the beginning when they were just working out of a garage. You know, where for the first 30 plus years of their history, minus the little period where Steve Jobs wasn't there, they're basically driven by his pursuit of perfection. Where Tim Cook is now coming in, and his mantra that I've read recently is that it is simplify, perfect, and delight. Still a pursuit of perfection, but there's a little bit of nuance there. But overall, you can tell that they're a very different organization than they were in the beginning, and they have to be, and that's fine, and they're doing very well. So overall, what's happening is that your culture is going to be moving as your company does. And what's going to be changing it? The first one is going to be size. You are necessarily going to be a different company at 40 people than you are at 4. There are going to be new policies, new rules, new requirements, et cetera, that are going to change the tenor and the tone of everything that you do. That goes both ways. On the one hand, you've got growth. Everyone that comes into your organization is going to change your culture a little bit. Going the other way, losing people. Every single person that you lose is going to change your culture a little bit as well. Additionally, the way in which you're losing people is going to affect the way that your culture exists. Are you open and transparent about it? Are you doing everything behind closed doors? Additionally, when you are losing people, are you doing something to improve your lot as an organization? Things like exit interviews. Here's an example about us and how growth has changed us. The picture here on the left is our temporary space. We had a space that we outgrew, and for a few months while we were building out our current HQ, we were in a room that was maybe 20 by 40 feet. It was long, it was narrow, it was hot, it smelled funny. There was a shortage of bathrooms. Didn't have any conference rooms, you couldn't get any privacy whatsoever. But the thing that was interesting about being in that space, which was by and large terrible, was everyone was happy and optimistic, because what it meant was that we were a growing company and we were just very happy about the future and what it meant for us to be going to a new space. And then when we moved into our headquarters, it sort of galvanized everything that we were doing, because it meant, okay, we are out of our starter space, we're out of this weird, awkward, smelly, temporary space, and now we're in our new home, moving from not very much square footage to about 5,000 square feet. It was so much that we couldn't really handle it. Like, we had nowhere near enough furniture, nowhere near enough anything. And so then, it's kind of like goldfish. How they say goldfish grow to the size of the aquarium that they're in? Well, that's when we went on a hiring tear, because we had no shortage of room. It changed the entire feel of the company. It made us feel, quote unquote, like grown-ups. Now, at the same time, we're going through another situation dealing with size, because I just mentioned the hiring tear that we went on. We've managed to outgrow this space. So a few months ago, we started looking for a second one. We opened that one 3 weeks ago and moved people into it. It's a block away from the HQ. And what that managed to do for us is to take a space that was very vibrant and very full feeling and then empty it out. And then you put new people in an office, and then that one feels not quite as full either. So it put us in an interesting place where you are both growing and feeling like you're shrinking at the same time. It introduces the other issues of how do you keep an entire group unified across two spaces. I don't have an answer for how that's all going to work yet. It's only been 3 weeks, but ask me in a few months and I'll let you know. But it is an interesting problem. One of the other things that's going to affect you is overall maturity. I liken it to dog years. People say that 1 year for a human is like 7 for a dog. I think for companies, it's probably closer to 4. That first year is still you getting your bearings and all of that, and you're getting older and wiser and figuring things out. And so we're almost 7 years old. And we've sort of figured some things out. I can't say that we're experts on everything yet, but we figured some things out. And I think there are a lot of there's some stumbling blocks that every organization is going to hit. And I think the 4-year mark is going to be right. But overall, what's happening as you grow as an organization is you're getting a clearer idea of what you want to be and making that happen. For us, as we grew, we changed from a very obnoxious, freewheeling and boisterous organization to being one that I would like to think is at least a little more mature. What we've definitely done is become an organization that's more family friendly. So when we started, one of the other founders is here. We were young and everything was about having a good time. And so our parties were very alcohol-centric, and that was what it was. That's what a good time meant for us. As we grew, we knew that we couldn't that wasn't a sustainable model for us, partially because of our own changing interests, but because of the people that we were hiring and the people that we wanted to hire. We needed a different level of maturity. And so this is Ty. This is our holiday party last year. I mentioned that our events used to be a little more alcohol-fueled. It's like, don't get me wrong, he's wasted right now. But, this is just one representation of the fact that now we're a family-friendly company, and that's what we strive to be. We also are very strong supporters of having women in tech, and so we have sought out events and other organizations that we can support in order to help make that happen. One of the next things is new skills. Again, going along with maturity. As your company grows, you're going to have to learn some new things to get better at what you're doing and to do more of what you want to do. For us, when we started, the general idea was we just want to build awesome things, and we didn't really think that much about it. That was just kind of the goal that we had stated for ourselves. And what that meant is that, okay, when we started, we were very developer-centric. As I mentioned earlier, we consider ourselves to be a digital product studio. There's a very big shift in thinking there that has to happen, because when you're a developer, you're concerned about building it. When you're building a product, it is still about building it, but it's also about designing it and deciding whether that's the right thing. It also requires you to hire different people. You need an entirely different set of skills in order to do all of those things well. Moving from being developer-centric to being more inclusive of these other disciplines is hard. I say is because we're still going through it. It's still difficult, but we're going through it every day, and we are making the attempt to get better. But we recognize the friction that exists, and we've embraced it, as opportunities for growth to get better at what we do. The next one. Prosperity. One of the things that prosperity is going to do for your company, it's great. It gives you flexibility, it gives you some breathing room, it just gives you all of this optimism to know that you can do more with yourself, to do more. The world becomes your oyster, and when you have that kind of enthusiasm, it's a galvanizing force, and it's very powerful. Like, doing well begats doing well. For us, we took the company to Whistler. It was fun. But on the other side of that, you've got hardships. That's also going to take a very large toll on the company that you've managed to create, because it introduces fear and uncertainty and doubt. And instead of being able to focus on how you can be bigger, better, awesome, you begin to worry about whether you're even going to make it at all. So let's recall 2008. I don't really want to, but I know for us, 2008 was incredibly difficult. When the economy tanked, work disappeared, and for us, it was kind of the first time that we ever were forced to deal with the potential of losing substantial. Up until then, it was a fun time, freewheeling and having just a grand old time. And then when the work dried up, it turned into, okay, what are we going to do month to month to keep the lights on? And what are we going to do to keep all of these people? And we actually like this thing that we have, and I don't want to go get a real job. And so what it managed to do a few different things. Yes, it introduced fear and uncertainty and doubt. But more importantly, what it managed to do was to strengthen our resolve to keep what we have. And so we found a way to get through it. For us, we did it through expanding into mobile. We have a lot of thanks to give to Apple for the iPhone on that one. And so we managed to survive and got through it, and we believe that we're a better company for it. I know a lot of the other agencies represented in this room have similar stories. But definitely a character building exercise for us collectively. And I would choose to not have any more character building if I can. So Am I saying that with all of this change that we don't have any control over what's going on? It's like, I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is that you need to accept that your culture is going to change based on everything that you're doing and take responsibility for the fact that it's something that you can mold and shape. Basically, it's your job to guide the sap the way that it needs to go. So let's go back to how you can actually take this culture and make it what you want it to be. And let's revisit the definition of what it is. It's a set of shared values and beliefs, yada, yada, yada. Now, the first thing, it's going to take work, a lot of it, because the bigger your organization is, the harder it is to get a lot of people working in sync. So let's talk about how that process can actually start. Some of you that are familiar with psychology are familiar with the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The general idea is that in human development, once you get past some of the early needs of simply survival, then you start to focus on other things as well. I believe that companies work the same way. Other people have made other versions of it. I tend to still like the original. But I introduced the idea of fear and uncertainty and doubt in talking about 2008. Overall, for some organizations, no, you are not in a position to focus on culture because you should be, and you are focused primarily on survival. That is perfectly fine. For many of the startups that are represented in this room, what you're focused on in your first couple of years is simply paying the bills and continuing to exist as an organization. That is totally fine because that is what you should be doing if you want to actually stick around. So the number one thing that you need to do in order to foster a good culture, get your shit together. You know, this just means handle the basics, get it out of the way to get your people into a comfortable place. Next up, what you need to do is figure out, why are you doing what you're doing? What is it that you're doing? So what's your mission? You know, your mission should be something that inspires your people. It should be your raison d'etre. It's your call to arms for everything that your company is. So, come up with your mission. Share it with your people. If it isn't one that resonates with everyone, revisit the mission until it is something that actually is going to work for your organization. One of the keys about the mission is that it doesn't have to be very long. It should actually be the opposite. The key is that it needs to be very efficient and very direct in saying what it is that your company does and what your company strives to be. So here's ours. What I can tell you about the story of creating this mission is that it took hours. It took about 3 to 4 hours of the executives sitting in a room arguing over everything in this statement except that it would end in a period. So this may be a similar exercise for you, but it is one that's incredibly valuable for you. One of the things that you'll be able to do next is to talk about what your company values. You know, I'm sure a lot of you have heard people wax poetic about how important company values are. They actually are that important, so all of that waxing poetic is true. But one of the things that people don't say is that the most important thing about being able to fill out the sentence of my company values X is whether your company actually means it. A lot of companies make the mistake of writing down the values that they want to have and not the values that they do have. If you aren't actually living the values that you say you have, you need to revisit your values because your people are going to recognize that disconnect, and that is going to potentially breed frustration. Let's go with the example of Google here. The mantra for Google forever has been, don't be evil. There are many that would argue that Google has stepped away from this, you know, in terms of what they're doing privacy-wise with your data and all of these other things. So you hear all of these stories, many of them recently. On the other hand, you hear other stories about engineers being able to halt conversations with executives by saying, this is something evil, we shouldn't do this. I don't work for Google, so I don't know which one of these is true. But what I will say is that they have my data, so I'm not going to speak ill about Google today. Another example is Zappos. Zappos' core value is that they want to deliver wow through service. And not only have they written books about how great customer service is and, as an extension, how that can affect your company culture, every employee, when they start at Zappos, works in the call center. That's just how important it is to them. Every year during the holidays, when they experience high call volume, every employee can be called to work in the call center, including the CEO of the company. He's a billionaire, and if you call their 1-800 number, you may be talking to the CEO of Zappos. That's just how important they find customer service to be. So here are Substantial's values. I'm going to go through some examples about how we manage to live our values every day. Again, this is just a matter of how we do it, and how it can all kind of come together into a nice system. So collaboration. What you'll see here in this picture, up front you have two people collaborating. Look at that. That's wonderful. What you don't know from this picture is that that's actually collaborating across disciplines. On the left, you've got Ryan. On the right, you've got Greg. Ryan is a designer. Greg is a developer. In the back there, you've got Zach and Jeff collaborating as well. Pairing is wonderful. It's part of the agile, lean way of doing things. But that's not actually why we do it. We do it because we find collaboration to be something that's more efficient. We find it to be so efficient that we keep this open floor plan because it facilitates having collaboration like this. Instead of Ryan and Greg needing to go and set up a meeting and call out a room, no, they just lean over and talk to one another. It makes those kinds of micro interactions easy, which reduces the friction of the work that they do all day. Everyone is sitting at a desk that's in an open space like this, including the executives. There are no offices. We're also always striving to get better at what we do. That exists on all levels. It's a matter of realizing that we don't know everything, trying to learn more every day. So what you have here is one group's retrospective. For those of you that don't know, retrospective is a meeting that you have at the end of a week or at the end of an iteration where you just talk about how it went. And then hopefully the next week or the next iteration you do it better. Now, that's great as a developer philosophy and for developers to sit in a room with their team and talk about how did that go. This idea of continuous improvement is something that happens across our entire organization. On any given day, for many meetings, you will have the question come up, why are we even having this meeting? There are many recurring meetings that happen that get scrapped simply because of that kind of questioning. Our ops team opts to do things this way. Everyone does. It's a matter of how can we be more efficient and better at what we do. So a couple of examples here. As I mentioned, we opened this new space. We moved in, and it was great. Everybody was super stoked, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is great. But you see those light bulbs there? The first thing that I heard from just about everyone was that those light bulbs were terrible, and that they were blinding, and that they were too much. And it's like, okay, so now I have to solve a light bulb problem. Fine. So we fixed it. We got a dimmer switch. It was a $50 switch that saved us thousands of dollars in replacing light bulbs. Like, all right, great. Now, another example of this is in our hiring process. So I already mentioned that we are multidisciplinary. Now we've got design and strategy and all these other disciplines in addition to development. Now, when you're doing that, you have to think about different things when you're hiring. So one of the exercises that we just introduced a couple of weeks ago is taking the new candidate, sitting them in a room with a designer and a developer and sometimes a strategist or some other combination therein, and having them work through a product with you. We have some stock problems, and we actually talk about, we have this idea. How would we take this idea and build it? And over the course of an hour, you sketch out an entire experience. In this case, it's an app, but that is probably going to evolve over time. And what you learned by doing something like that is how that person is going to collaborate, what kinds of ideas they're going to have, what are the things that how do they start solving a problem? Yes, it's very time intensive, but it's something that we find to be important. So now it's a core part of our recruiting process. One of the things that you can see in this picture here is our photo booth. First thing you see when you walk into our office, it's a photo booth. It's great. It's fun. That photo booth, as important as it is to our office experience now, that started out as a weekend project for one of our developers. We host this event called Beer and Code. Developers come, they hang out, and work on their side projects, meet with other developers. And this person was the host for it. His name's Mike. Mike wanted to have a way to track the people that were coming to this event, and he wanted to do it in a way that actually involved writing code because that's who his audience was. So we created a photo booth. We had it running. He was like, oh, well, that's kind of cool. Over time, we started using it all the time. We just kind of set it up as a permanent installation in the office, eventually rolling it into our entire corporate site experience. That wasn't a project that anybody ever asked him to do. He just had a problem. He went out and solved it, told the rest of the company that he solved this problem, and then we talked about how we could make that experience better. It's great. And we try to take that same level of initiative with everything that we do, whether it's a small problem or a big one. This is a picture from our South by Southwest party a couple of years ago. One of the things for us was that, okay, well, we're going to go do this whole South by Southwest thing. But if we're going to throw a party, we got to do it our way. So we went and we found some DJs that were like, okay, if we were throwing a party here in our HQ, are these people that we would hire? It was a very important part of doing what we did down there. We had a great time, and it was wonderful. Authenticity is about being true to who you are. One of the things about being true to who you are is actually knowing what that actually means. So we have very clear ideas on what we want to be, and more importantly, what we don't want to be. And so doing something like this is like, okay, things like that become very easy when you know that. Another part of that is our sales qualification process. I won't bore you with all the details there, but I mentioned the idea of collaboration and agile, lean philosophies in terms of how we work. Well, the way that we work requires our clients to be a very active participant in that process. It means that every day there's going to be a phone call or a Skype meeting where they sit in with the team and talk about what's going on, what are we doing next, what's the most important thing, what are the problems that we're having. It requires a lot of input from them. Not every client is ready to do that. A lot of people are used to the more traditional services model where you just throw it over the fence and it's like, don't talk to me for 3 months, give me something, and then I will tell you how wrong it is. Now, the way that you can avoid someone telling you how wrong you are is by having them involved in the process on a day-to-day basis. So as part of our sales qualification process, we describe the way that we work. We describe how involved it is going to be for our clients. And as part of doing that, you are also sussing out whether they're actually prepared to do that. Not every organization is. And when they're not, in our case, we let them go, because we know that that is not going to be a project that is going to work for us. We don't pretend that we're a company that's going to work for everybody. We don't pretend that the way that we work is for every organization. And that's okay. It's about holding true to what it is that you actually value. And almost lastly, strong and unique community. I mentioned a couple of different events that we throw, and they're fun. We bring in developers, we bring in designers, we bring in other kinds of business folks to come in and have their meetups. And they're fun. We also support events like ADA or Railsbridge that help to foster and teach women development. But more importantly, or at least as important as what we do outside of our company, is the community that we create for ourselves. So we realize that people have interests that extend beyond the work that they're doing for us every day. So, well, how do you do something with that? Well, for us, it means that we have a yoga group. We have yoga instructors on staff, and so they'll go up to our roof deck and do yoga once a week. Now that it's cold, we're hosting that somewhere else. But there's a yoga group. We've got a group that does bikes. We've got a group that does snow sports. That's probably going to pick up very soon. We've got another group for DJs. Now the point of all of this isn't for people to just slack off at work. It's more about all these people are going to be doing these things anyway. There's already community that exists within the office. Just make it easy. And then as part of the hiring process, it's like, ask people what they're into. Sometimes that thing that someone is into could actually be of value to what you're doing. Recognize it, create it, foster it. And then I won't say much more about doing good work because, well, it's pretty self-explanatory. Again, I want to remind you, I've mentioned a couple of ideas about Agile and Lean. While it's listed as being a developer topic, Zach's talk is actually more focused on the business at large, so I would welcome everyone to go and sit in on that. I'll be there. It'll be good. Now, one of the questions that you may be asking is like, okay, so you've said all of this stuff about what culture isn't. You said all this stuff about how it's always changing, it's moving target. Yeah, that's great. Now, the first thing I said was, well, what about all those perks and benefits? And that they aren't actually your culture. It's like, how important are they really? Here's how that works. Your culture is defining your perks. The way that all of this really works, or the way that it should work, is that you have your mission. That is what your company wants to be. You have your values. What does your company find to actually be important? Your benefits and your perks and your policies then fall from that. It's considered to be a tree, and these are the things that are hanging off as branches. So why do you have paid vacations? Moz does this. Every employee on an annual basis gets $3,000 in reimbursement for their vacation. That sounds fantastic. Now, the reason that they do that is because they want their people to be well rested, and they value the fact that people not working will actually make them work better. That is how they demonstrate that. If you value fitness as an organization, then you can put in a climbing wall. I am drawing a blank on who it is that has this. There's a company in Seattle that has this climbing wall. You have a stocked bar because, from what I hear, whiskey is delicious, but you also have it because sometimes people just need to unwind. And there's something to be said for giving people the ability to unwind. I can't speak to Nerf guns. I don't actually know why one would have Nerf guns, but that's more just me. And then you have a DJ booth because you value having a strong community. For us, music is a very core part of our experience. The founders of the company, all very large music enthusiasts. So for us to make a DJ booth the focal point the first thing that you see when you walk into our HQ makes perfect sense. The idea of dedicating a third of our space and keeping it open so that we can have events like Beer and Code or UX Happy Hour is something that we hold very dear. The DJ booth isn't about, oh, we have a DJ playing all the time. It's like, no, we don't. Most of the time it's sitting idle. But what's more important is what it says about how much we value what's happening when we're off the clock, and the other kinds of interactions that you can have. Now, with all of those things, some people are probably thinking, it's like, well, that's great if you're a services company, or you've got some hotshot product and you're just rolling in money. It's like, no, it's not actually about money at all. What it is about is doing the things that your organization is able to do to demonstrate the values and what you hold as important. I picked this in particular picture because it's two different ideas rolled into one. Occasionally what we'll do in our office is have Waffle Wednesdays. It means exactly what it sounds like. It will be a Wednesday, and sometimes we will have waffles. It's great. Doesn't cost very much money, and I love coming in to warm waffles. On hot days, we happen to be located across the street from Molly Moon's. You walk over to Molly Moon's, you grab a few pints of ice cream, you bring it back to the office. On a hot day, everyone loves ice cream, or sorbet, or gelato, depending on your lactose situation. But the thing that's more important is that $20 goes very far just for increasing morale for a few moments, gives people a chance to unwind and eat something delicious. So it's not a matter of spending thousands of dollars or anything like that or making huge investments. It's about the day-to-day more than it's about the large statement. Moreover, the statement about ice cream and waffles, it's like, yes, I'm VP of Culture. I didn't come up with Waffle Wednesday. I just enjoy it. Everyone at Substantial recognizes that our culture belongs to them. Culture is a shared responsibility. So some of you may be sitting here and wondering, well, what can I do? I'm not actually in a position of power in my organization. It's like, that's not the point. Culture goes, yes, it comes top down, but it can also go bottom up. It's about creating the kind of organization that you want to have. And if that requires you doing it within your team first, then do it within your team. If you can do it within your group beyond that, then go for it and do that. Moreover, be uncompromising. It's culture. This is everything that you do all day. You're going to be sitting in a room on average 8 hours. You might as well have it be something that you enjoy and have it be a positive environment. I mentioned that we're uncompromising. We find that it works. But I'm not saying all of this to make a bunch of people go and try to copy the things that we're doing. That's not the point here at all. I enjoy what Substantial is. It's great for me and for us. Your mileage may vary with all of the individual particular things that we do. The idea is that you go back and do the things that your organization needs to be what it needs to be, not that you try to be what anybody else is doing. So it's not too late for your organization. It's not too late for any organization. It's a long game. It's tree sap. It's moving slowly. So your goal is to guide it in the direction that you want it to go. So let's go through quickly what I've gone through today. First off, culture's everything. Feedback loop. Tree sap. Have your values, but more importantly, demonstrate them. Mean what you say. And your culture is going to be unique. So create the company that's right for you. So in closing, how do you suck less? It's actually not that hard. Build a company where you want to work. Thank you. So I guess this is the part where I open it up for questions. There are mics, so yeah, come on up.
You mentioned that collaboration
Yes.
as a value,
Yes.
and yet your organization, and you talked about how you demonstrated it by bringing an open plan, and we're basically encouraging people to be able to walk across and just interact with each other casually.
Uh-huh.
Yet you divided the space. You put into 2 separate locations. So essentially, I'm of a belief that values aren't really your values if you sacrifice them for some other reason. So the question is, to some degree, that is a sacrifice of collaboration. How is Substantial compensating for that sacrifice?
That's a very good point. So a little more of the detail on how we tend to organize our teams. So yes, in our HQ and in our second office, we have this very large open floor plan. But that doesn't mean that all 60 people are working on the same thing. We've got teams of 4 to 10 that are working on a particular project. So in opening up the second space, we were also very aware of, it's like, oh, this is going to make life incredibly difficult. How do we do this? One of the ways that you get around that is by not splitting it up based on something arbitrary. You split people up based on team. So most of the collaboration that is happening is on the team level. And so it's about having teams sit together, which we already do in both spaces, and by having them have an open floor plan, within themselves, those collaborations can be facilitated. Not necessarily having those collaborations among everyone. But, for the question at large, yes, people still have keys to both. We have lots of various things to pull people together, and, it's an open door policy in general. And also proximity. It's a block. We were very, very picky about what we were looking for because we didn't want to create any additional burden that would keep people from talking to one another or otherwise split the company. Go for it. I couldn't hear you, sorry.
Was there a thought to just get a new space that was bigger?
Yes, for a moment. But one of the things that we actually started looking for this space before we needed it by a few months. And so, it was a bit optimistic even when we were looking. And now we're at a place where we needed something immediately to solve the problem. Now we're at a place where we're going to see how this goes. And probably in a few months, we'll revisit the question of, is this working? How is it working? And thankfully, we only have a limited amount of time left on our lease anyway. So at that point, the bigger question of what to do will be visited.
Hi, you referenced 2008 and kind of how scary that was. How did you preserve your guys' culture while going through something that challenging?
Lots of group hugs. So for us, we were a lot smaller then. So we were on the order of 10 people, which already makes that problem a lot easier. But by and large, what we were doing and the work that we were doing, it came down to just being very open and honest about what we were all going through. We lost some really good people during that period, and it was terrible. And we admitted how terrible it was, and we were sad. We were bummed about all of it. But for us, it came down to just being very open about what we were going through to everyone. And by doing that, it helped to forge stronger bonds for the people that remained. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Hi, how are you? I just wanted to ask, I've worked at agencies where they put a lot of effort into culture, and I worked at one agency where they used to give us free lunches twice a week. And I remember very well my last free lunch when they laid a third of the agency off because they hadn't managed to balance themselves properly. And I've worked at an agency that spent no money on culture because they, as they put it, were more concerned with profit. So my question to you is, how does an agency leadership team find the balance between those two extremes and find a culture that is realistic to the agency, but also ultimately won't cause problems in times where business is not so good?
That's a good one. So I guess one of the values that we went through and that we kind of argued for and against, and that it eventually didn't make the list, was pragmatism. So all of the executives, for everything that we do, it's about being responsible, partially because of the 2008 experience that we don't like to think about. It introduces a lot of humility into everything that you're doing. So for us, it's a balance of how do we keep the culture that we want to have, and do some of the big things that we want to do the small things like ice cream and yada, 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 but still maintain our position as a healthy business, and that ends up affecting every part of the organization. So on the one hand, you've got sales, who's out there beating the streets, and it's like, okay, now we need to focus on getting big projects, small projects, and having a good balanced portfolio. It's like, great. We need to make sure that people are learning, all of that. Okay, great. Now, clearly, if your sales pipeline is slowing down or anything else is going on, then you don't have the luxury of doing all of the things that you want to do. There's nothing wrong with being honest about that. I guess one of the things that we have done to ensure and keep everyone aligned, we tell people what's happening. We tell them when times are going well, we tell them when times are not going well. And then, in many ways, it's like the honesty kind of balances out the fact that you may or may not be doing all of the things that you used to do. But if you're being relatively responsible about the way that you plan things, then you're never outlaying so much that you're putting yourself in a position of risk, by doing too much culturally. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I just have a very simple question. If you have an open floor plan, how does anybody hear anything?
So I don't know if everybody heard that, but it's like, if you have an open floor plan, how does anybody hear anything? And some of my coworkers that are in this room would say, they ask me that question all the time. Because we have the noise of people talking to one another. We also have music playing in the office on a regular basis. And by regular, I mean all the time. And we have dogs running around and all these other things. It's like, yes, we freely admit that the open floor plan introduces a level of noise. Now, you can either say that exists and then say that it's the world's largest problem, or you can accept that energy is something it's an energizing force. And that's what we choose to do. We also, by placing teams together, makes it easier to whisper if all you have to do is lean instead of yelling across the room. But yes, there is definitely a regular murmur within our office, and we choose to view that as a positive thing and not a negative.
Well, if it's sort of background noise, you could block it out. But, I was looking at your floor plan. I would not be able to hear a thing, especially if somebody was on the phone or,
Thankfully, we have enough spaces where if someone is on the phone or needs to have a Skype meeting, it's like there are conference rooms available. There is that living room like lounge where people go and have phone calls. People will often go on coffee breaks just to go have a phone call or whatever it is. It's like if it's going to be something that's disruptive, then people are respectful of the kind of space that we have and act accordingly. So it's a bit about the collective and what we're doing as an organization, but then it's also about individuals kind of taking care of it on their own and trying to not introduce that as a problem.
I don't know if you need a microphone. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how the neighborhood and Capitol Hill is part of your culture and sort of why you chose to stay there and sort of what the hill means to you guys.
So the question is, how does Capitol Hill affect us, and what does that mean for us as an organization? Well, as I said, we're located on Capitol Hill. Our second office is located also on Capitol Hill. So if you are ever on Pine and Broadway or Pike and Broadway, you're right next to one of our offices. The reason that we're on Capitol Hill is because, well, I'll give you the real reason why we're on Capitol Hill. It's because the people that decided where our space was going to be live on Capitol Hill, and we like walking to work. And now I'll give you the other longer answer. Capitol Hill is just interesting for us. It's where we're playing anyway. It's where we hang out, and again, because it's where we live, why not be there? One of the other things that we found interesting is that when we found our headquarters, there just aren't that many office spaces like ours on Capitol Hill. There are a lot of really interesting old spaces in Pioneer Square, but we didn't really want to be in Pioneer Square, so we picked the Hill, and it's worked out for us. At this point, when we were looking for the second space, we couldn't think of going anywhere else, and the idea of moving off the Hill is not something that we're really willing to entertain. It's just too important for what we are. Like, there's something about being next to Cal Anderson Park and watching people play bike polo that's just part of the experience. There's something about when one of our coworkers is playing a show at what used to be the Comet. You stay at work, you leave work, you go and watch the show at the Comet. There's something about that that just makes it really easy. Or leaving work on a Friday and going to Unicorn. Again, it's just convenience helps a lot, and the fact that half of us live there makes that even easier. Does anybody have anything else?
When did you decide to take the title of VP of Culture, and sort of what was the process that led up, events that might have led up to you saying that's a full-time?
When did I take the title of VP of Culture, and what are the events that led up to that? So I took the title of VP of Culture last October, November-ish, I guess about a year ago. And some of the events that led up to that, for the first few years of, I guess most of Substantial's history, I was doing account work. I was account manager for a while, and then as we started building out our strategy team, I didn't need to do that part of the work anymore. It was great. Client work is wonderful, but doing something else was also looking more and more exciting. So the other things that I was already doing were more cultural things. And as we were discussing last year, we were making some shifts to the executive team. One of the things that came up was the idea that, well, what is one of the things that really creates what Substantial is? And the decision was that it was our culture. And it's like, well, then we need to dedicate resources to that. And since I was already putting time there, it's like it became sort of a forcing function for me to complete my transition out of doing client work and doing more of this. And so now the role of VP of Culture, it's very cross-company. So I get to work with everybody, which is how I like it. All right, I think that's it. Thanks for coming.